Electricast. Walmart Business saves you time, money, and hassle, which means you can focus on what really matters, like putting the money you save back into what you do, spending more time training your team, filling orders, and finding new clients. Anything and everything, right down to, oh, that's the one, choosing the best hold music. Walmart Business. It's the Walmart you love, now for your business. Learn more at business.walmart.com.
Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design, where we celebrate women who are shaping their lives one extraordinary day at a time. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, self-care coach for women who are ready to make self-care a priority to support them in life and business. Every week, I'll be speaking with inspiring women from various walks of life who will share their personal journeys and will discover how they have fearlessly carved their own paths as business owners, passionately pursuing their dreams and creating a meaningful impact on their communities. So let's get started. Hey friend, welcome back to Her Extraordinary Life by Design podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, and I am really glad that you popped in to join me today. This month, we've been moving through a framework I teach inside my program, which is a deeper framework inside my Yes Reset method, and I call it the Aligned Energy System. It's a rhythm of awareness, alignment, and application that helps you move through your life with clarity, steadiness, and energy that actually supports the season you're in. In week 1, we talked about noticing your inner signals and trusting what you already know. In week 2, we talked about honoring who you are becoming instead of staying loyal to the old version of you. And today, we're stepping into something that I believe that high-achieving women, actually, let's just say most women, do not talk about enough. Not because they don't understand it, but because it feels unfamiliar. It's so personal, and honestly, it feels safer to avoid it. And what I'm talking about is receiving. Not the kind that makes you feel needy, but the kind that actually helps you to stay resourced and supported instead of drained, and one where it keeps you from carrying more than your energy can hold. Because receiving can feel uncomfortable, right? It can make you feel exposed. It can make you feel weak. It can bring up memories where support didn't really feel steady or safe enough to accept based on those past experiences. And for a lot of women, especially women who grew up being the responsible one, receiving feels like a risk because trusting others hasn't always felt safe. But here's what I want you to lean into today. Receiving isn't a sign of weakness. It's a form of support so that you can stay steady and stay connected to the woman you're becoming without burning through your emotional energy to hold everything alone. And accepting support is part of how you stay aligned with the woman you are, the woman you're stepping into becoming, which is why I wanted to talk about the importance of receiving for overall well-being in today's episode. You know those moments where you tell yourself you're fine because you can handle it, that you can figure it out, you'll push through, and you do again and again. But if you're being honest with yourself, there's that small part of you that feels tired of carrying everything alone. And it's not because you're incapable, but it's more because it feels heavy in a way that used to feel normal, but now it's just feeling draining. And what most people don't see underneath the surface is that doing everything by yourself wasn't just a choice. It was a skill that you learned early, long before you had the language to name it. It made you feel dependable, made you feel responsible, the one people could always count on. And somewhere along the way, you were taught that giving was the safer path, the noble path, the unselfish path, and that receiving was something you embraced only when you had no other choice. But what it also taught you to do was to never rely on anyone, to never ask for help, to never trust, to always stay 2 steps ahead, and to handle things yourself so that you never had to depend on support that might not come. And all of that trained your nervous system to believe that receiving is risky, not because you can't receive or don't want to, but because it's never really felt safe enough for you to trust that support would be actual support that made you feel good. So even now, as a grown woman with a full life and a world you built from grit and determination, part of you still pauses before letting support in. And although it's wonderful to be independent, being dependent on yourself became your protection mechanism, right? Your independence became the safest place to stand. It became exactly what you needed to get through the world. But now you're starting to feel it, right? That mistrust, that stubborn self-reliance, that automatic grip on doing everything yourself is quietly draining you because your life has changed and you're still carrying it like you did back then. And that's a truth we often don't talk about. You became resistant to receiving because you learned to protect yourself from disappointment. And that protection has shaped who you have become. I can so relate to this because this was me. And it's why I chose this topic for today, so that we could talk about it and look at what receiving support really means and how it can strengthen your well-being so that you can move through your life with more ease, more clarity, and really more emotional space instead of carrying everything alone. Now, there's this moment, maybe you've lived a version of it, where let's say you're standing in your kitchen at the end of a long day. Everything seems fine on the outside. Your work day's over. You've answered all your emails that needed to be answered for the day. All your calls have been handled. And from the outside looking in, your day looks like it was really productive. And maybe it was really productive, but inside you feel that little ache of tiredness behind your ribs, the kind we don't talk about, the kind where you push through because you always have, the kind you don't want to face because slowing down long enough to feel it would force you to see what you've been holding together and what it's been costing you. You open the fridge, you grab what you need, and you start prepping dinner. And as soon as you begin, the weight of your day you carried follows you into the kitchen. Your mind juggling unfinished thoughts, upcoming decisions, and silent expectations because it never really learned how to put things down. And then someone, maybe your partner, maybe one of your kids, says the most harmless thing. Babe, you look tired. Or, Mom, you look tired. Do you need any help? And without even thinking, you smile, swallowing that hit to your pride because the last thing you want is for anyone to notice that you're stretched thin. And then you take a breath and you say the thing you've said your whole life. Nope, I'm good. I've got it. You sound calm, but inside something is tightening just a little bit because the truth is you're not fine. You are tired. You're maxed out because you've been juggling more than anyone realizes, more than anyone knows because you have kept it to yourself. You're not sharing this. And so handing something over feels harder than handling it yourself, right? Because you know how to do it yourself. You know how to keep things moving. You know what you want to do. You know how to stay ahead. You're responsible. You're in control. And being in control has always felt safer than depending on someone who might not follow through, who might not do it right in your eyes. And the thought of letting someone step in to carry part of the weight or allow them to see that you could use support, well, that feels exposed. Like you're opening a door you're not sure will stay open. Like you're trusting someone to be consistent when your body remembers the times support didn't come or disappeared or came with judgment attached to it. So you politely decline and you say, nope, I've got this, and you keep going. You chop the veggies, you wash the dishes as you cook, you clear the counters as you move, and you carry the emotional weight and the endless list of small tasks without skipping a beat. And the whole time, there's that voice inside your head whispering, oh, it would be so nice to breathe. It would be so nice to sit for a minute. It would be so nice to say yes to help. But your habit of declining support is stronger. That self-protection is older, and the part of you that learned to do it all by yourself, because that's what kept you safe, takes over again. And no one sees that weight that you're carrying, nor do they understand why you always say no when the tension's so thick that you can cut it with a knife, because you've conditioned yourself not to expect support, not to need it, and definitely not to rely on anyone to follow through, which is, again, a form of control so that you don't get hurt or end up disappointed. And this is what resisting receiving looks like. It's not dramatic moments always, not breakdowns, just quiet, right? Everyday moments where the tension sits in your shoulders, the room starts to feel heavier, the people around you can sense your energy shift, even if they can't name it, and moments where receiving feels like the bigger emotional risk and doing it yourself just feels easier, safer, more familiar, right? So here's what we're going to dive into today. First, we're going to talk about the belief that sits underneath almost every "I'm fine, I've got it" moment. The belief that receiving is risky, not because you can't receive or not that you don't want to receive, but because your body still remembers the moments when support didn't feel steady, didn't feel safe enough to trust. It's a belief that tells you it's easier to keep doing everything yourself rather than risking being let down or being disappointed. And even though your life looks different now, this pattern still feels familiar to you because it was wired into you long before you had words for it. Then we're going to look at how that protection, the very thing that once kept you steady, starts showing up in ways you don't always notice. How it keeps you in survival mode even when your life is different now, and how it makes you feel responsible for every detail, every emotion, every outcome, because depending on other people never felt like an option for you. And how that pattern, that automatic reflex to carry things yourself, shows up as tension in your shoulders, pressure in your chest, a quiet drain on your clarity, your capacity, even when everything looks fine from the outside looking in. And then finally, we're going to unpack what receiving actually looks like when it comes from alignment instead of fear, where receiving doesn't feel like exposure, it feels like support, where letting someone else help you, someone else step in to help you, doesn't make you look weak. Instead, it gives you the space and the emotional bandwidth you've been craving, where receiving becomes its own form of leadership, not because you need rescuing, but because you finally let aligned support work with you instead of carrying everything by yourself, where you start to trust your own discernment, your own awareness, your own inner signals so that it allows you to finally allow the act of receiving to feel safe enough to say yes to. Because when you trust yourself, you don't fear support, you choose it. So, if there is a part of you that's ready to stop carrying everything by yourself, a part of you that wants to feel supported instead of stretched, connected instead of guarded, today's conversation will help you understand why receiving has felt so hard, what it's been costing you, and what it can feel like when support finally becomes something you can say yes to with confidence. So let's start with the belief that sits underneath almost every automatic, "No, I'm good, I've got this," that you've ever said. And that's the belief that receiving is risky because somewhere in your body, there's a memory where support did not feel safe enough to trust, where it became a reflex move for you of saying it's easier to do it myself than to risk being let down. The belief that whispers if you allow yourself to rely on someone else, you'll owe them something. A belief that convinces you that if you let someone see that you need support, that they'll see that as weakness. And underneath all of that is an even quieter truth that receiving opens the door to disappointment, and you've worked too hard to feel that way again. Whatever your experiences have been around receiving or asking for help or being let down, this belief that receiving is risky shows up in those tiny automatic moments that you barely register anymore, becoming that reflex move to take over a task the second you sense it slipping out of your control, even when someone else is standing right there, willing and completely capable of helping you. Or a pattern of saying no before you even consider saying yes, because, well, saying yes to you will mean that you have to trust someone else with something that your body still is remembering getting hurt by. You have a memory of it, of getting hurt by. Tell yourself, it's fine, I'm used to it, I don't want to burden anyone, even if what you really truly crave is for someone to help lighten the load. And the hardest part is that there's a constant chatter in your head that reminds you that letting someone help feels unsafe, that letting someone in feels like exposing yourself to the possibility of being judged, disappointed, or misunderstood. And you've survived too much to risk that lightly. And if you allow someone in to support you, that it will feel like giving up control you've depended on for years, control that's kept you safe, protected you when life felt unpredictable, and kept you moving so you never had to slow down long enough to feel the things you weren't ready to face. And you're not sure what happens if you loosen that grip. Your success was built on being responsible, the steady, dependable one, always being 2 steps ahead, that you've learned to equate receiving with risk and doing it alone with strength. But here's what I want you to understand about what's actually happening underneath that belief. You're not avoiding support because you're unwilling to trust. You're avoiding it because trusting others has felt unsafe, unpredictable, or disappointing in the past. You've compensated in the only way you knew how, in the only way that made sense. And you learned to trust yourself more, to trust your timing, to trust your standards, trusting your follow through, your ability not to drop the ball. And along the way, asking for help stopped feeling like an option because you never had the safety to practice receiving. It started to feel like something that could cost you more emotionally than it could ever return. And being that open, being that seen, is something your nervous system has learned to guard very closely a very long time ago. But what if that openness in this season of your life could become the doorway to making things easier instead of heavier? What if receiving didn't take power away from you at all, but rather it gave you more space, more steadiness, more room to breathe? That the guardedness that you've developed, that instinct to hold things together yourself, that didn't come from weakness. It came from wisdom. It came from your experiences. It became a protective pattern that kept you steady in those seasons when you truly had no choice but to rely on yourself. And yes, it shaped how you move. It shaped what feels safe. It shaped how much you let people in. Not because you lack the ability to trust, and not because you're being overly dramatic, but because there was a time in your life where being in control was the most reliable way to feel safe. And that came from survival, from needing to protect yourself in moments where support wasn't always steady, wasn't always safe, wasn't something you could always count on. But this season of your life is different now, right? You're different. Your needs, your pace, your bandwidth, your inner world, all of it has evolved, which is why receiving now asks you to shift, not into weakness, not into dependency, but into a new kind of self-trust. So now that we've looked at why receiving has felt risky and how your body has learned to treat support like uncertainty instead of safety, I want to talk about what that pattern's actually costing you. Because even though you've grown, even though you're stronger, you're wiser, you're far more self-aware than you used to be, your nervous system hasn't fully updated the story because it still believes that you need to hold everything. It still believes that staying independent is what protects you. It still believes that letting someone else in is the actual risk. And this is where I want you to notice something important. The pattern doesn't just keep you from receiving, it shapes the way you experience your life. It influences what you say yes to, how much you hold, how tightly you grip things that were never meant to be carried alone. It shapes how close you let people get, how much emotional room you have, how your energy gets used, and the way you move through your day, carrying way more than you need to. And when you start to see that, the real cost becomes impossible to ignore. You see, when you carry everything alone, it doesn't make you feel strong. It makes you feel obligated. There's that obligation where when it's not shared, it turns into that pressure that never turns off, that never lets you rest. So you wake up already anticipating the next thing you have to manage. You walk through your days holding space for everyone else's emotions while burying your own. You fix, solve, coordinate, plan, and you guide, not because you always want to, but because it feels impossible not to. And little by little, there's a cost. And so I want to share 6 ways this shows up and the hidden weight that you're carrying when you don't allow yourself to receive. So here's the first cost, and it's one most women don't notice until they feel it in their body. You stay in old survival modes, even when your life no longer requires them. You navigate your day with the same hyper-awareness you needed years ago, even though circumstances have changed. You stay 2 steps ahead so that you avoid dropping the ball. You brace for disappointment because your body still believes that being let down is the most familiar outcome, and you do everything you can to prove that you can hold it all, even when no one's asking you to. It's not logic, it's muscle memory. Your body has learned to stay ready, so it never learned how to rest. The second cost is one that shows up in ways you don't always notice at first as well, especially for women who pride themselves on being capable. You default to independence even when you're craving support, telling yourself that you want more ease, you want more space, you want to feel supported, held, met in the moments where your energy feels thin. But the second support is offered, your guard goes up before you even realize it. And it's not because you don't want help, but because needing help still feels like exposing a part of you that you've kept protected for years. The third cost affects how you move, how you connect, how much you let others participate in your life. You protect your pace by isolating instead of connecting, which means you're moving fast, you're executing, You're keeping things running, but when receiving still feels unsafe, you unintentionally start protecting your pace by doing things alone. And it's not because solitude feels good, but because involving anyone else feels unpredictable. So even when there are people who love you, who want to help you, and they're fully capable to step in, you still say, nope, I've got it. Because for you, doing it alone feels like the only place where things stay steady and predictable. The fourth cost touches your relationships in the ways you limit how deeply you let people in, even when you crave support, connection, or partnership. And this is where you miss out on aligned relationships that could make life easier. Not because they aren't available, not because you're hard to love, not because you're hard to support, but because you've learned to equate receiving with risk and doing it alone with safety. And that pattern limits how fully you let people show up for you, how deeply you allow connection, how safe intimacy feels. And that pattern limits how fully you let people show up for you, how deeply you allow connection, how safe intimacy feels, how nourished you feel in partnership, how supported you feel in your friendships, how much space you'll give others to care for you. And these aren't conscious choices. They've been conditioned reflexes that once kept you protected. Now, the fifth cost is the emotional weight you absorb without even noticing it, because you start to carry emotional weight that was never meant to be carried, that was never meant for you to carry. You don't just carry the tasks. You actually carry expectations, tone shifts, unspoken needs, and relational responsibility. That you feel the room before you enter it. You anticipate what everyone else needs first and you bury yourself, right? You bury your own needs underneath that. I know I'm speaking from experience, so that's why I can say this with conviction. You hold more emotional bandwidth than anyone realizes. And because receiving still feels risky, there's no counterbalance. There's no soft landing, no shared load. And the cost isn't just exhaustion, it's emotional isolation in the middle of a full life. And finally, the sixth cost is one you experience internally in your clarity, your intuition, and your decision making. And this is where your clarity gets clouded by constant self-management. When you're always the one doing everything, it becomes harder to listen to what you actually need. Your inner signals get drowned out. Your intuition gets crowded. Your decisions come from obligation instead of alignment. And this is the part we don't even often recognize, because when you don't let that support in, you start making choices from depletion instead of alignment. And that erodes clarity faster than anything else. So here's what I want you to understand. The real cost. It's not burnout. It's not stress, and it's not fatigue. Those are symptoms, right? But the real cost is you end up living a life where you're physically surrounded, but you're emotionally unsupported. So let that sink in for a moment, and let me repeat this in a different way so that it lands for you. When you allow yourself to go through life, never allowing yourself to receive the much needed support that you crave, a life where your capacity is high, your competence is strong, your schedule is full, your mind is sharp, your goals are clear, but your energy feels stretched, your heart feels guarded, and your bandwidth feels thinned, where your nervous system's still protecting you from a version of life you no longer live. The hard part is that the real cost isn't your workload, nor your pace, not even the exhaustion. The real cost is that you end up carrying a life that looks full on the outside while feeling completely and utterly unsupported on the inside. So you move through your days with high capacity, high competence, but low connection and low emotional replenishment. And that mismatch is what quietly wears you down over time. That's exactly why we're having this conversation, so that you can see clearly, honestly, and without judgment what this pattern is costing you, and why receiving in this season of your life might be the very thing that restores you. Now, you know those moments when you catch yourself thinking, you know, it would be nice, but you don't finish the sentence, thinking that, wouldn't it be nice to not be the only one carrying the weight, nice to feel supported without first having to earn it, nice to trust that someone could actually show up for you in the same steady way that you show up for everyone else. There's that part of you, the part you rarely give voice to, that doesn't want to be the strongest one in the room all the time. Not because you can't handle your life, but you can, right? You have been. But because you want a life where your strength isn't the only thing holding everything together. Because when you're always as independent, dependable, competent one, and your default response is, no, I'm fine, I've got this. Even when you're craving relief, there's that part of you that wishes you could let your guard down long enough to let someone in. A part of you that wants support, that feels clean, that feels steady and aligned with the woman you are now, not the version of you who learned to hold everything because excellence was your only option, You want to feel supported in a way that doesn't require you to perform, to prove or pretend that you're fine all the time, but also support that doesn't come with strings attached or comparisons or hidden expectations. You just want to be supported in a way that feels like a soft place to land because that's what you desire, what you've always desired, right? To be surrounded by people who get you, where you're seen without having to over-explain, where you're supported without having to earn it, where you're held without it being a transaction, and where you're valued without performing for it. You want to be able to walk into rooms where your guard doesn't instantly go up, where you don't instinctively brace for judgment, and where your presence doesn't feel like a test you need to pass. And most of all, you want receiving to feel as natural as giving, not like a risk, not like exposure, not like a crack in your armor, and not like something you have to apologize for. Just something that fits the woman you are today, a woman who wants support that feels steady, clean, aligned, so she doesn't have to brace her way through every moment alone. Listen, deep down, the desire isn't simply to be able to receive without fear of being judged, disappointed, or misunderstood. The deeper desire is connection that honors you, support that meets you where you are, and relationships that align with your growth, your rhythm, and your values. A life where you can exhale because you're finally allowing yourself to receive support instead of carrying every ounce of the weight alone. And I want you to understand that that desire isn't selfish. It isn't weak. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's human. It's true. And it's the kind of desire that becomes possible the moment receiving begins to feel safe. So, what would receiving look like if you loosened your grip just enough to let your next version you, the one who doesn't brace for disappointment, shape how support gets to flow into your life? Where something inside you pauses before you say your usual, I've got this. And in that pause, you notice something you've never really taken the time to acknowledge before. One where you finally admit to yourself that you're tired of doing everything by yourself, that you're tired of managing every detail, tired of staying in control, tired of being the one who always makes sure nothing slips. Not because you can't handle your life or the pace you move at. You always have. You're good at it. No, this is something deeper, more real for you because something in you is shifting and the old way of doing life is starting to rub against the woman you're becoming. It's when someone offers to help you and your automatic no catches in your throat, where you feel it when you sit down at the end of your day and your body lets out a deep sigh that you didn't even notice you were holding. You feel it when your mind whispers that it would be so nice to not have to carry every detail alone, that it would be nice to let go of that tight grip and actually feel what it's like to let someone else share the weight with you, to experience support instead of just managing everything around it. That's awareness. It's the moment that you catch yourself before repeating the pattern, the moment where the old reflex meets a new desire, and for a second, you can feel both. But then something inside you shifts again, a softer click, like a truth rising within you that you can't ignore. And you start to realize that receiving isn't weakness, it's not handing over your control. No. Receiving is allowing what's aligned to support you so that you're not bracing your way through every moment of your life. It's the moment you get to lean into that, where you're allowed to let someone meet you in your reality, not the face you've learned to put on when you don't want anyone worrying. You're allowed to let someone stand beside you without assuming it makes you look weak or incapable, without having to prove that you have everything under control. Because that's the part you never say out loud, right? If someone sees you need support, it feels like your identity takes a hit. Like the strong one, the steady one, the capable one suddenly looks like she slipped. But what if being seen didn't take anything away from you? What if it actually gave you the room to breathe? This is alignment. It's the moment where you stop fighting the possibility of support and you start wondering what life could actually feel like if you didn't hold every ounce of it by yourself. Alignment is when your guard softens just enough for you to imagine ease, real ease, not the kind you buy in time blocks, but the kind you feel when someone steps in with you instead of watching from the sidelines. Alignment is when support doesn't feel like a threat to your identity, but a match to your inner world. But then it goes deeper, right? Because you begin to understand that you don't have to earn support. You don't have to justify needing support or asking for help. You don't have to fear it. You only have to allow it. That's application, not the doing kind, the becoming kind. The moment where you stop bracing and you start breathing. Application is the moment where your yes to aligned support comes from calm instead of caution, where receiving feels like a natural extension of your inner clarity, not something you have to explain or apologize for. It sounds like, I can let this in. I can let this be easy. I can let support meet me where I am. It's the lived moment where you trust yourself enough to let someone else support you without interpreting it as a threat to your independence. One where you realize that allowing support isn't losing power, it's gaining emotional room. It's gaining internal space you haven't had in years. It's gaining the capacity to move through your life without carrying every ounce of it on your own shoulders. And in that shift, life stops feeling like a solo performance and starts feeling like a partnership with the people you've chosen to let close, which helps you move through your days with more steadiness, more clarity, more emotional space, because you're no longer the only one managing every detail. This is the deeper truth. Because when receiving comes from alignment, not fear, support becomes nourishment. It becomes energy. It becomes the grounded steadiness you've been trying to create by force. And that's the real shift. The click where you finally realize that being supported doesn't change who you are. It simply lets who you are breathe. Okay, let's slow this down for just a moment. Let's take a minute to pause before you get back to your day to day. I want you to just take a moment and scan your week for the moments where you've caught yourself stepping in before you were asked to do something, or the moments where you handled something by yourself, even though there was someone right there to help you, or maybe you handed it off only to micromanage every step. And I want you to reflect on how your body responded, where you felt that familiar tightening in your shoulders or that small pressure behind your eyes, or even that subtle heaviness in your chest that showed up when you were carrying more than you would admit out loud. I want you to sit with this for a second, and I want you to think about your week. What happened this week where you had a reflex moment with your signature knee jerk, I've got this, even though part of you wished that someone else would take the load off your shoulders, that they would take the lead? Or when you felt yourself micromanaging something, you handed off, but you just didn't trust letting it go. Now that you have that visual, here's the question I want to ask you. And I want you to think about it and answer honestly, but without judgment. Where in your life are you still doing everything yourself? Not because you prefer it that way, but because there was a time in your life when doing everything yourself was the only way that felt safe enough to trust. And I want you to let that sit. I want you to sit with that for a minute, because this reflection isn't about fixing anything. You're not broken. It's just your habit of stepping in to say, no, I'm fine, I've got this, or not stopping for a moment to allow yourself to look at what you're doing and ask for support because of that part of you that still believes it's safer to handle it alone, which is your old protection patterns. It's still trying to keep you safe. It's stopping you from receiving the ease you've actually been craving. It's about seeing the places where the old reflex is still louder than the new desire. And again, naming the habits that once protected you, but are now pulling you out of the grounded way you actually want to move through your life is important. When you can name even one of those moments, you begin to realize that receiving is good and that letting support in doesn't make you any less capable. To recognize what you truly want instead of what you've gotten used to carrying. That naming piece is the first step toward receiving, where you can finally step into the version of you where receiving actually feels safe. It feels steady and aligned with the woman that you are today and the one you're becoming. And if you've been listening to this right now and something inside you is starting to click, even just a little, because you're now realizing how often you still carry things alone, how automatic that I've got this reflex has become, and how tired you are of doing life from that protective place, then that's your internal signal speaking. It's your inner knowing telling you that you're ready for support to feel different now, steadier, safer, in a way it never has before. And the part of you that's nodding right now, that's the part that's craving relief, craving ease, craving space, craving a way of moving through your life where receiving doesn't feel like a risk, but like a natural extension of who you are. And that's exactly where the next step begins. Because if you've been noticing that you're still carrying more than you need to, managing every detail, micromanaging even when you've handed something off, or feeling that internal tug that says, I wish I didn't have to hold all of this, you know, whatever that is, over and over and over again, then this is your moment to pay attention, because those moments are the exact places where your old protection patterns are still running your life, even though the season of you is ready for something steadier, something better, something more aligned with living your best life. And if you're ready for support to feel safe, to feel steady and aligned, if you're ready for receiving to feel like emotional breathing room instead of a threat to your independence, If you're ready to move through your days without doing everything alone, without bracing, without overcarrying, without pushing yourself past your own capacity, then I want to invite you into a Yes Reset strategy call with me. This is where we'll begin to map the places where you're still doing everything yourself, not because you want to, but because your nervous system learned that self-reliance was the only safe option. And together we'll start to rebuild a way of moving that supports your pace, your vision, and your bandwidth emotionally and energetically without forcing you to slow down or hand over your power. This is where support can start to feel clean, where receiving can begin to feel possible, where your life finally has space to feel like yours again. So if you're ready for support to feel like relief instead of risk, then check the link in the show notes and book your Yes Reset strategy call with me today. Okay. Before you head back into your day, I want you to hold on to something with me for a moment, okay? I'm going to double down. Receiving doesn't make you less powerful. It makes your power sustainable because the strength you're known for, the strength everyone admires, the strength you've relied on your whole life was never meant to be fueled by carrying everything by yourself. There is a steadier kind of strength inside you, a quieter one, a more aligned one. It's that strength that comes from letting support meet you instead of bracing against it. That comes from trusting that you don't lose anything, not your edge, not your identity, not your independence, when you stop holding every detail by yourself. This is the part of you that's evolving, the part of you learning that ease isn't earned, that support isn't a luxury, that receiving isn't exposure, it's nourishment. And little by little, moment by moment, you're shifting from survival strength into sustainable strength, the kind that doesn't drain you to maintain it. And speaking of strength, I want to tell you what's coming next because the timing couldn't be more aligned. Next Friday, November 28th at 12 p.m. Eastern, I'll be dropping a new special episode that I recorded with two incredibly extraordinary women who both were in the September series, the wellness series for September. First is Diane Conkin. She's the founder and CEO of Advanced Mind Health, a no-repeat client therapy practice. Diane shared with me that her process helps many high-profile professionals shift self-sabotage, intrusive emotions, and substance habits in just 1 or 2 sessions, and she reports a 99% success rate among her clients. And Charlene Stiles, the founder of Pure Natural Health and Wellness. She guides women to understand their metabolism, balance their hormones, support their nervous system, and recognize the habits and thoughts that shape their actions. So feeling energized, confident, and clear becomes who they are naturally. Together, we're opening a conversation around what it really means to have it all, not for performance, but from truth. We'll be reflecting on the emotional weight of unmet goals, the pressure to measure worth by checked boxes, by unchecked boxes, and the quiet grace it takes to release judgment and honor the journey. If you've ever questioned whether you're doing enough or being enough, this conversation is a reminder that you don't have to do more to be whole. You just have to come home to what's already true for you. So make sure you join us next Friday. It's a conversation I promise you won't want to miss it. Again, thank you so much for being here with me today. I truly appreciate you. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep designing your extraordinary life one day at a time. Thank you for joining me on Her Extraordinary Life by Design. I hope you've been inspired and empowered by the incredible stories shared on this show. If you enjoyed this episode and the conversations we've had, I would greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review. Your feedback and support mean the world to me, and it will help others discover the podcast and join our empowering community. Remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Together, we can continue to learn from these amazing women, uncover their extraordinary journeys, and be motivated to create our own lives by design. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, stay empowered and keep shaping your extraordinary life one day at a time.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Introducing Taking Share, Lessons from Leaders with Rob Holmes, Chairman, President, and CEO of Texas Capital. During each episode, you will hear from leaders, decision makers, and culture shapers across industries. What drives them? What tips the scales when making tough calls? How do they continue to evolve? We're here to understand the thoughts behind their actions and discover how they are taking share. For more information on Texas Capital, please visit us at our website.
Electricast.